Good morning, Shangam School. I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Happy Monday, June 1st. Can you believe that it's June 1st? I can't. It's crazy. If you think about it, the last time we were in school, it was March 13th. And now it's June already. How did that happen so quickly? Anyway, today we are going to be learning all about tall tales. And I love tall tales because they have a lot of humor in them, and they are what we call over the top, and they exaggerate a lot. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. But first, let's take a look at what a tall tale is. So tall tales fall under that umbrella of folk tales. And if you remember from last week, I told you that both fairy tales and fables fall under that umbrella of folk tales, and so do tall tales. So let's find out exactly what a tall tale is. Let's take a look. So what is a tall tale? A tall tale is a fictional story that stretches the truth. The hero in the story is larger than life and is sometimes based on a real person. Now I want to touch base a little bit on that larger than life meaning. As you can see in this picture here, this is a picture of a well-known folk tale called Paul Bunyan, and there's his ox, Babe. And Paul Bunyan, you'll hear today in the story, is a really large man. It doesn't mean size when I say larger than life. It just means that they have a lot of characteristics that are unique and special, almost superhuman, as we would say. So here are examples of famous tall tales, and Paul Bunyan, like I just said, is one of them. It's a very well-known one. John Henry, Johnny Appleseed, which you should all be familiar with. If you went to Shangam School in first grade, then you definitely know about Johnny Appleseed. Annie Oakley, Pecos Bill, and Casey Jones. These are not all of the tall tales, obviously, but these are some of the more well-known ones. Just like fairy tales have their own elements and fables had their own elements, what the characteristics that make a tall tale or a fairy tale or a fable these are the elements of a tall tale. They combine fact and fiction, so that goes back to the definition of a tall tale, right? That they sometimes contain real people. The main character has superhuman traits and or abilities. The main character is often helped by a powerful object or animal. Speaking of animals, that squeaking you hear is my dog Otto, who's decided to now squeak, his little chipmunk toy. They have exaggerated details. Now, this is why I love tall tales, because I think the exaggerations are part of the humor. And if you don't know what exaggerated means, I'm going to explain that now. So, think about it. If you've ever had to wait in line at the grocery store, especially now, right? Or if you've gone to amusement park or Disney World and you're waiting in line and you're like, oh my goodness, I've been waiting in this line for like 15 hours. That's an exaggeration. You didn't wait in line for 15 hours. We all know that you didn't wait in line for 15 hours. You exaggerated the fact, right? You're trying to make it bigger, larger than life, okay? Those are those exaggerations. And once we start reading the stories, I think you'll really see how exaggerations come into play in these tall tales. The solutions to the problems are meant to be humorous, and the story also takes place during a real time in history, which I think is so cool because I love historical fiction type things. Today, after I read the story Paul Bunyan to you, you are going to complete this chart. I've already filled in the character name because we're going to use the story of Paul Bunyan today. You are then going to come back and fill in what are his superhuman traits, what are his character traits. Now remember, the character traits are both internal and external. They're different from the superhuman traits just because we look for character traits in all stories, but not all stories have, or not all characters rather, have superhuman traits like a tall tale character does. Character traits are internal and external. What do they look like on the outside? Those are those external. And then how are they inside? How do they feel? How do they act? Those are the character traits you're looking for as I read this story. What tool does Paul Bunyan use? And then who is his animal companion and what kind of animal is it? So we're going to switch gears. We're going to jump over to our story. And why can't I get it to go large? Whoops. There we go. And now I'm going to disappear so you can enjoy the pictures. Paul Bunyan, which is an American tall tale, retold by M.J. York. Now remember, because it falls under that umbrella of a folk tale, these were all oral stories that were passed down until somebody actually took that oral story and wrote it down on paper. So let's see what happens in Paul Bunyan. Remember, you're looking for character traits, you're looking for superhuman traits. Be on the lookout for those exaggerations too. Oh, hey, there's a big clue right there. I bet you can guess what tool Paul Bunyan uses. Way back in the olden days, when big woods stretched clear across America from coast to coast, a bouncing baby boy was born in Maine. This baby was called Paul Bunyan, and he was a mighty big boy. Baby Paul was so big, it took 5 storks to bring him when he was born. By the time he was a week old, he was wearing his father's clothes. When he was hungry, he drank all the milk out of 12 cows. When he got the hiccups, everyone ran out of their houses thinking it was an earthquake. When he sneezed, folks had to open their umbrellas all the way in California. Let's pause for a second here. We already see lots of exaggerations that by the time he was a week old, he was wearing his father's clothes. Could that really happen? No. He drank all of the milk out of 12 cows. When he got the hiccups, people thought it was an earthquake. And when he sneezed, people had to open their umbrellas in California because the spray from the sneeze went that far. So if you're not familiar with where Maine is on the East Coast where New Jersey is, but up north, way north. It's the top state of the 50 states on the East Coast. And California is all the way over on the West Coast. So that's a pretty far distance, and I apologize for my dog making all kinds of noise. When Paul Bunyan grew up, he knew there was only one job for him. Folks were a-moving west in those days, and they all needed houses. They needed firewood and furniture and all kinds of things made of wood. And Paul Bunyan knew he would be the biggest and best logger in the country. Paul Bunyan set up his logging camp on the Onion River. He had so many men in his camp, they worked in 3 groups. One group was always going to work, one was working, and one was a-coming back. Paul's voice was so loud, all the men had to wear earmuffs so they wouldn't go deaf. It took a lot of food to feed all those men. The cook set up a pancake griddle bigger than a skating rink, and that's how his assistants greased it up, skating round the griddle with bacon strapped to their feet. The cook was nearsighted, though. One day, he put blasting powder in the batter instead of baking powder. Those pancakes blew the roof clear off the cookhouse. A lot of exaggeration happening, right? And it's pretty funny. Paul Bunyan had a mighty big axe. It was so big, he could chop down 40 acres of trees in one swing. One day, he got tired while he was heading back to camp, so he let his axe drag behind him. That axe opened up a big old crack folks now call the Grand Canyon. So here we're taking actual historical things, right? The Grand Canyon exists, but we're saying that it was created by Paul Bunyan's axe dragging across the back. Now the winter of 47 was colder than the coldest winter the old gray beards could remember. It was so cold the words froze in the air as you said them. Then there was a huge chatter in the spring when they all thawed at the same time. It was so cold, even the snow turned blue. But the snow and the cold didn't bother Paul Bunyan. Why not? Because when Paul Bunyan walked, the snowbanks were so afraid of getting stepped on, they moved clear out of his way. So, Paul Bunyan was walking out in the woods during the winter of the blue snow. The snowbanks moved away, and under the biggest snowbank was a big blue baby ox. The ox was born white, but he turned blue on account of the blue snow. Paul cradled the ox in his arms and took him home. The ox gave Paul Bunyan's face a big sticky lick, and they became great friends. Paul called the blue ox Babe, and the name stuck even when Babe grew bigger than Paul. Babe was so big, it took 47 axe handles to measure between his horns. He was so long, if you or I stood at his tail, we'd need a telescope to see his nose. When Babe wanted a snack, he ate 30 bays of hail in one bite, wire and all. With Babe around, Paul Bunyan could work twice as fast. As quick as Paul cut down a tree, Babe hauled it away. When Paul Bunyan wanted to skin a log, he hitched Babe up to one end and held the bark himself at the other end. Babe would pull the log out clean as a whistle, leaving Paul holding the bark. Around the camp, the men hung up their shirts to dry on Babe's horns. But Babe's most important job was making the logging road straight by pulling out their twists and turns. One time, Paul Bunyan and Babe went out to the Dakotas to do some logging. They worked so fast and hard they cut down all the trees there. But since they were headed home again, they decided to clean up before they left. Paul Bunyan pounded all the tree stumps down into the ground, and that's why, to this day, there are so few trees in the Dakotas. After a while, Babe got sick of hauling logs all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. So Paul Bunyan decided there should be a canal running all the way from Minnesota to Louisiana. He dug the mighty canal. When the dirt went over his left shoulder, it made the Rocky Mountains. And when the dirt went over his right shoulder, it made the Appalachian Mountains. Babe kicked over his water bucket to fill the canal. And today, logs can float from north to south on the Mississippi River. After many years of logging together, Paul and Babe's work was done. So they packed up and moved north to Alaska. Listen carefully. You can probably still hear Paul yelling, "Timber!" And then this talks a little bit more about A Tall Tale. If you want to go back and read that, you are more than welcome to do so. So now, I hope you picked up the bits and pieces that you needed to fill out the template. What are Paul's superhuman traits? What are his character traits? What's his tool? And who is the animal in the story, and what is the animal's name? Something else to point out that I forgot to mention at the start of this is that many tall tales start off with the hero or the main character's life as a baby. So it'll be interesting to see as we read some more throughout the week what we learn. Have a great day, guys. Love you. Bye. Otto says bye too.